Good evening. Welcome, friends, and thank you for being here this evening for our Yom HaShoah Commemoration. We are going to say prayers, and then we have a program that I will introduce in just a little bit. And please open up your prayer book to the first page.
We begin with silence, the silence of death, the silence of life, the silence after destruction, the silence before creation. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life, when martyrdom becomes a constellation of faith against the unrelieved black of space about us. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night. There are no messengers to tell the full tale. There is only silence. The silence of Job, the silence of the 6 million, the silence of memory. Let us remember them as we link our silences into the silence which becomes a prayer, which links us with the past, touching that darkness we cannot fully enter, the anguish which is memory and love, and life and death.
We would assemble in the darkness. To light a candle there, or even a match, would have brought immediate disaster upon us. We spoke about matters of the spirit and eternal questions, about God, about Jews in the world, about the eternity of Israel. In the midst of the darkness, I sensed light in the unlit room, the light of Torah. That's Leo Beck. We kindle these lights in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. Zichronam livracha. May the memory of the righteous be for a blessing.
I'd like to invite those members of our congregation I have previously spoken to come forward to light these 6 candles in memory of the 6 million who perished in the Shoah. Each of those who have lit these candles are themselves survivors, or the children of survivors, or the children of those who perished in the Shoah.
Blessed is the match, consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the heart's secret places. Blessed is the heart with the strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match, consumed in kindling flame. Written in pencil on the sealed railway car. Here in this carload, I, Eve, with Abel, my son. If you see my other son, Cain, son of man, tell him I.
Shomer, Shomer, Israel. Shomer, Shomer, Israel. Shemor, Sherit, Israel. Shemor, Sherit, Israel. Ve'al Yovad, Ve'al Yovad, Ve'al Yovad, Yisrael, HaOmrim Shema Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer, Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer, Yisrael. Shemor, Sherit, Yisrael. Shemor, Sherit, Yisrael. Ve'al Yovad, Ve'al Yovad, Ve'al Yovad, Yisrael, HaOmrim Shema Yisrael.
You who live secure in your warm houses, who return at evening to find hot food and friendly faces, consider whether this is a man who labors in the mud, who knows no peace, who fights for a crust of bread, who dies at a yes or a no. Consider whether this is a woman without hair or name, with no more strength to remember, eyes empty and womb cold as a frog in winter. Consider that this has been. I commend these words to you. Engrave them on your hearts when you are in your house, when you walk on your way, when you go to bed, when you rise. Repeat them to your children, or may your house crumble, disease render you powerless, your offspring avert their faces from you.
If it is comfortable for you to do so, please rise. Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin. Be'emuna shelema, b'viat HaMashiach, b'viat HaMashiach ani mamin, ve'af al pi she'yitmameach, im kol ze ani mamin. Ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin. Be'emuna shelema, b'viat HaMashiach, b'viat HaMashiach ani mamin, ve'af al pi she'yitmameach, im kol ze ani mamin. Ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin.
This is scroll number 940 of the 1,564 scrolls rescued from the Czech Republic. In 1942, following instructions of the Nazi regime, all communities of Bohemia and Moravia sent their Torah scrolls to the Jewish Museum in Prague. Their scrolls were eventually transferred to the damp, ruined 16th century Mishal synagogue outside of Prague, where they remained until they were brought to London in 1964. In 1964, these scrolls were rescued and brought to Westminster Synagogue in England, where they were repaired, restored, and allocated to communities and organizations worldwide. Their scrolls are never sold or donated, but allocated on loan by the Memorial Scroll Trust. This scroll was received by our congregation on July 14th, 1967, and has been at home in our ark for the past 57 years. According to the Jewish Museum of Prague, the scroll's origin is the province of Kamenets-nad-Lipau of Bohemia, and it is believed it was written at the beginning of the 20th century. It is truly a living Torah. This scroll was written beautifully. The writing is smaller and fading, but is still legible enough to use. The congregation uses this scroll on Yom Kippur afternoon by request of families for their B'nai Mitzvah. It's danced around and celebrated on Simchat Torah. Rabbi Milder chants Torah from it in rotation with our other scrolls, and it is always included in our Yom HaShoah observance. Congregation Beth Emek is honored to have scroll number 940 in our ark, and will keep it alive by sharing it with our community and honoring those who had to surrender it.
An oath. In the presence of eyes which witnessed the slaughter, which saw the oppression the heart could not bear, and has witnessed the heart that once taught compassion until the days came to pass that crushed human feeling, I have taken an oath to remember it all, to remember, not once to forget. Forget not one thing to the last generation, when degradation shall cease, to the last to its ending, when the rod of instruction shall have come to conclusion. An oath, not in vain, passed over the night of terror. An oath, no morning shall see me at flesh pots again. An oath, lest from this we learn nothing.
Haim, haim, shemarim, la'adam, et haderech, et haderech. Haim, haim, shemarim, la'adam, et haderech, et haderech. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק כאשר הם עצמם עטו בעינם. יש אנשים שזיו זכרם מאיר, כאשר הם עצמם אינם עוד בתוכנו. אורות אלה המאמינים בחשכת הליל, הם שמורים לאדם את הדרך, את הדרך. הם שמורים לאדם את הדרך, את הדרך. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. We remember. We remember. We remember. I would like to extend my gratitude and the thanks of Congregation Beth Emek to Walter Gawing for speaking with us this evening. Walter's life is just one piece of the terribly complex history of the Holocaust, its survivors and its victims. The story is one that many survivors can relate to, and yet it is wholly unique, as are all of their experiences. Only a certain number of refugees made it to Shanghai, and there what began as a refuge became a ghetto. Again, a fortunate few made their way to San Francisco. After a lifetime of varied experiences, made richer and more beautiful by his marriage to Anna, Zichrona Livracha, and by their children, Walter found a spiritual home here at Congregation Beth Emek. Those of us who participate in our weekly Torah study get to enjoy Walter's insights and especially his great wit. Would that we all, in the face of life's most brutal challenges, could live with our humanity and our humor intact. Thank you, Walter, for sharing with us what you have told only to a few on a few rare occasions.
Thank you for this invitation. I've given this speech a number of times to various occasions. If anyone of you heard it before and there's slight discrepancies, don't call me on it. The story changes not because the facts change, but my memory sometimes doesn't recall things in the same order that it used to. So anyhow, I was born in Austria in 1930 in a small town in the southern part of the country. The family was fairly well off, not rich, not poor. I do remember as a very young child there was a big commotion and we got a radio which my father and my mother paid for on a weekly basis to a man who came to collect for the purchase. The world has changed since then. I attended school, which was not a very happy experience because in the class, there were just two Jewish boys, another boy and myself, and once a week, I believe it was on Wednesdays, a priest came and gave religious class, religious education. And since we were Jewish, we were excused and we were allowed to go out of the room. And I think someone taught us boys something about Judaism. So far, so good. The bad thing happened after school when all the fellow kids realized that we too were the ones that killed Jesus Christ. And we pretty much had to run. Things went along fairly well until the Germans marched in and annexed Austria. I remember great jubilation by the population. They were very enthusiastic. The parades, candlelight marches, pamphlets, and so on. Shortly after that, my father was called in, probably the Gestapo or the police, and was asked or told to sign over some property to, I don't know to who, and my father asked, why should I do that? And the police officer said, well, if you don't, you're on your way to Dachau, and who knows if you'll ever come out. So I was glad to sign. After that, my parents were given notice that they had to leave the country within a very short time. I have no idea whether it was weeks or a couple of months. At that age, you know, I didn't participate intellectually in any of that, but we had to move to Vienna from Leoben, and we lived in a place with very many people in it. I remember a lot of people crowded together in a very small space. I attended school for 1 or 2 days. It was in a basement, and after a while stopped going. Why? I don't know, but anyhow, after a relatively short time in Austria, at which time my father and mother were looking for places to go, and in 1938, almost no country in the world would accept Jewish refugees unless they had a lot of money. I recently, in the last few months, learned that there was one exception, and that was the Dominican Republic. And they offered to take 20,000 Jews, but not that many went. And the Jewish people that did go established a dairy industry there. I know this information from my son, who now lives in Toronto, and in the winter goes to the Dominican Republic to get away from the cold. So the rest of the world was pretty much shut. There was one exception, however, and that was Shanghai in China. And my theory is that the reason that was open was that the Chinese and the Japanese were at war. The Japanese had pretty much occupied the countryside around Shanghai, and Shanghai itself was what was called an international city and was pretty much administered by the British and French and the Germans and the Japanese in one part of town, and the French concession in the other part of town. So I think no one really knew who was in charge, and so you get on a ship, and they let you disembark with just proof of vaccination. Okay, the problem still was getting up enough money to buy the tickets and getting permission to leave Austria, even though my father was told, you have to leave, get out of here. It was very difficult to get the clearances. The police had to clear, the state had to declare that he didn't owe any taxes, a whole bunch of red tape. Anyhow, he finally accomplished it, and we embarked by train to Italy, and I remember that the train stopped at Wiener Neustadt, which is a suburb where my grandparents lived, and they were there to wave us goodbye, and I remember that we were given chocolate bars, things kids remember. So we went by train. I remember there was a big feeling of relief once we crossed the border into Italy and were away from the Germans. We spent a few days in Italy. I remember chasing pigeons in Venice. And also there was a big military parade that we watched, people marching by. And then we embarked on an Italian ship, the Conte Verde, the Green Count, through the Mediterranean, through the Suez Canal, and we stopped in India. I think it may have been Bombay then. And I don't know how my father arranged it, but he called on a very rich, or so I was told, Jewish person, and he took us and introduced us as his family and asked the man for some money because he had no shame, but he needed it. And we were given, I think it was 10 pounds, which doesn't sound like much, but in those days it was quite a bit of money. I also remember we went on a sightseeing or something, a tourist attraction, a place where they disposed of human remains, and vultures came, and I got sick on the way back to the ship. The rest of the trip to Shanghai was uneventful, except at times it was very hot on the ship, but the food seemed to have been very good because we all kind of fattened up a little bit. When we arrived in Shanghai, we were met by a Jewish committee consisting of Russian Jews who basically were Jewish refugees from the Soviet Union who came across Siberia to Harbin and down to Shanghai following the Bolshevik Revolution, and they escaped from there, established a community in Shanghai. And we were loaded on a truck, and we were taken for a ride to where we were going to stay. We stayed in a room with one bed. That was my father, my mother, and us three kids. We had one room, one bed. We lay sideways. And we stayed in that room for a little bit until, again, my father, how he arranged things, I don't know, but he talked a Russian Jewish businessman in renting us a place to live, and I think he borrowed some money from him to help open a store. Okay, there's one thing I should back up. While we were in Shanghai, my father was told, the Chinese are very clever businessmen. They don't need another businessman. You should learn a trade. So what trade can you learn in a couple of weeks? The Art organization had a class on how to make soap. So he took that course of making soap and passed successfully after a week and put the soap on the shelf. And short time later, I looked at the soap and it was coming apart. It was kind of growing a beard. The soda was coming out. So he went back to the instructor and he says, look at this soap. The instructor said, Mr. Gehring, this soap isn't for washing, it's for selling. So needless to say, he did not open a soap factory in Shanghai. So we were enrolled, my brothers and I were enrolled in a school, Shanghai Jewish School. It was a school run on the English or British model. The language was of instruction was in English. The teachers were, one was, I remember, a white Russian, and it was a little bit tough at first because we didn't speak any English. No one in school spoke German, but young people are very resilient, and we got along. In 1941, I think it was, the Pacific War started with the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor, and we heard gunfire at night, although I slept through it. And the Japanese marched in, and nothing much changed for us for a while until sometime later, from what I later learned, was a German pressure on the Japanese to establish a ghetto for Jewish people. They didn't call it a ghetto, but a designated area which Jewish people who were now stateless and had arrived after a certain period of time had to move. So here we had to move again. When you have to move, you can't really strike the best business deals in selling the store that my father was on. And my father found a partner, and we moved to what is then called Hongqiu. It was basically a slum area. Parts of it consisted of bombed-out buildings. Fighting had happened in that area between the Japanese and the Chinese defenders. We moved into a corner house. It was round shape in the front which means the rooms were kind of pie-shaped. Okay. The building consisted of a ground floor where there was my father's Summit store, a little jewelry on the other, and I don't remember what the third store was. My grandparents and my two brothers lived in one room on the floor above the store. My parents lived on the room above their room, and I lived in the store, which meant that during the day I was homeless, because when the store opened, I had to fold up my bed and move. Again, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. My father was able to arrange for his parents to join us in Shanghai. That was before the Pacific War. How he did it, I don't know. They had been deported or banished to Poland, where they somehow got in touch with the Japanese consul in, I think it's Lithuania, and took a train across Siberia to Vladivostok, took a Japanese ship to, I think, Kobe in Japan, another ship to Shanghai, where they joined us. My grandfather died in Shanghai. He developed, it must have been some kind of stomach cancer, because he was in great pain and there was no medication. And he was buried in Shanghai, and the cemetery no longer exists. At age 14, one day, my father came to me. He says, "Walter, come with me." So, okay, like a obedient child, I came with him. He brought me someplace. He says, "Walter, this is where you work. This is Mr. Herr Stern, your boss." And that ended my education at age 14. So I became an apprentice furrier, which, if I'd had a choice, I don't think I would have chosen. In Shanghai, my mother developed tuberculosis. So it was kind of difficult. We didn't have any of this touchy-feely feeling stuff that families here have. We always say, stay away from your mother, don't get too close. If I drink that, I'll have to run to the bathroom. So anyhow, in 1945, in July, the ghetto was bombed by B-17 planes. They aimed at a radio station, but missed the radio station and hit houses where refugees lived. I think we lost like 19 dead. The war ended shortly thereafter, and then we found out how lucky we were to be in Shanghai. My parents decided that we wouldn't want to stay in Shanghai. They definitely did not want to go back to Europe. So there was a question of Palestine or Australia or United States. My father said, there'll never be peace between the Jews and the Arabs. And he didn't want to go there. Australia, he had no connections, but my mother had I think it was a first cousin in New York who provided an affidavit for us, and we applied and got visas, all except my mother, because the United States does not or did not allow tuberculosis patients in. So that parents dragged leaving Shanghai for as long as possible, because the thought was either the law might change, she might improve, the X-ray may miraculously show a cure or whatever. But there came a time when the visas were to expire, and my parents lied to us kids. They said she'd be on the next ship. And she wasn't. Anyhow, when the communists approached Shanghai, the Jewish communities were pretty much evacuated, and she got on a ship to Italy, and she died there. My father, my two brothers, and grandmother arrived in San Francisco by boat. We were again met by a Jewish committee who housed us in a hotel in the Tenderloin. And after a short time, we were evicted because my grandmother was cooking on an electric cooker, which was forbidden. So we had to move into another hotel until the community settled us in Richmond, California, in a house that had been built for the ship workers during the World War II. I got a job in San Francisco as a furrier apprentice, went to a union meeting, found out that I was being underpaid, and so shortly thereafter I told my boss that I'm now in the union, I deserve more money. He says, no, you don't, you're fired. So I found another job way out in the Mission Street in a very small shop, and I stayed there until the Army sent me draft notice. In Shanghai, in San Francisco, there were a number of refugees who had arrived from Shanghai who were fellow members of Beitar, a Zionist youth organization which I belonged to. And we had a chapter there which really didn't ever really take off very much, but we had meetings in a synagogue on Webster Street, and my brothers and I went to a meeting, and we were standing in front of the synagogue waiting for it to open, and we heard a voice, are you boys waiting for the Beitar meeting? And we said yes, and there was Anna, my wife, to be. We got married in 1951. In February, in March, I was drafted for 2 years. Fortunately, I was stationed in California for 1 year, and the other year at the Presidio of San Francisco, a hardship post. So we were pretty poor at that time. Our eldest son was born. He developed polio. So he was in the hospital for a bit, and then Anne developed a gallbladder situation. She went into Letterman. Anne had a cousin in Richmond who took our baby took care of him for us, and what with the rent and a corporal salary, it was really tough financially. We ate a lot of black olive sandwiches. When I was discharged from the Army, I decided I did not want to go back into the fur business. I looked around for a job, found a job with a Burroughs Corporation that was a relatively big company, building business machines, adding machines, typewriters, things of that nature, and I became a repair person and carried a big bag with tools and parts and worked there for 10 years. When, again, we wanted to start a union. The attempt failed, and I knew that I had no future in that company and looked around and ended up selling insurance for a Prudential Insurance Company for, 30 years? Until I retired at 65. And So here I am. The reason Anne and I actually joined Beth Emek was that my granddaughter was going to be bar mitzvahed here, and her other mother thought it would be nice if the whole family went to the same synagogue because we were going to Bnei Tikva. So anyhow, we went down here and we've been here ever since. And so here I am. That's it.
I can't say anything but thank you. Thank you, Walter. I'd like to ask you to join me for a moment of silent prayer. If it is comfortable for you to do so, I invite you to rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utehorim, Gezor Harakiya Mazhirim, Het Nishmot, 6,000,000 Achenu v'achiotenu, shenehergu al kiddush Hashem, ba'al harachamim yastirehem, b'seter knafav l'olamim, v'yitzor b'tzor hachayim et nishmatam, Adonai hu nachlatam, v'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkavam, v'nomar, Amen. Together, fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million murdered, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, yours. They will rest in peace. Amen. Yitgadal, Auschwitz. V'yitkadash, Łódź. Shemei Rabbah, Ponar. Ba'alma divra chirutei, Babi Yar. V'yamlich malchutei, Maidanek. B'chai echon uv'yom echon Birkenau. Uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael kavno. Ba'agala uv'izman kariv yanoska v'imdru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach L'olam U'l'olmei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach Theresienstadt. V'yitpa'ar v'yitromam, Buchenwald, v'yitnaseh v'yithadar, Treblinka, v'yit'aleh v'yithalal, Vilna, Shemei de Kudisha, Bergen-Belsen, Berichu, Mauthausen, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Dachau, Tush bechata v'nechemata, Minsk, Da Amiran Be'alma, Warsaw, Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya. V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mromav. Hu Yaseh Shalom. Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru. Kol balev ha-penima, nefesh Yehudi homiya, ulfatei Mizrach kadim, ayin Sophia, od lo v'atikvateinu, atikva bat shnot alpayim, leotam chofshi le'artzeinu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim, leotam chofshi be'artzeinu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Friends, thank you very much for coming this evening. Thank you again, Walter, for speaking with us. There are some photos and documents about our Czech Torah scroll on the table in the back.